All right, so I'm here with Thomas Vick, and we are recording our thoughts on the direction of the podcast. Where do we want it to go in 2026 and beyond? We obviously had the podcast sort of focused on legal issues related to estate planning when we first started out. And I think what we've discovered is the opportunity may be better focused on helping lawyers launch their law firms and their practices, and then how to sustain those practices over time and build a legacy law firm rather than an estate planning practice. So in that vein, Thomas, tell me a little bit about what you have thought or some of the discussions we've had this year so far on what we're going to be about as we move through 2026.
Yeah, well, I think we have value that we can provide to lawyers that are trying to start their own law practice or manage a small law firm due to the experience that we have. I started my practice in 2014. You've been a solo or small firm owner for several years now, I guess 10 years now. And so we've got some life experience that we want to provide, but we also want to be compensated for providing that advice, that insight. So kind of what we have in mind is to continue the public-facing podcast and have guests on where we talk about law firm life, how particular lawyers got started, and how did they network, how did they build their practice, what kind of systems do they use, what have they found to be helpful practices in their day-to-day life as a lawyer. And so we want to have those podcasts, which I think are interesting to people. Some of our viewed podcasts have been ones where we have a guest on. So that's what we want to do as far as the public-facing podcasts are concerned. But then we want that to be a draw to the Substack community. So we want people to subscribe to become part of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer community in the Substack. And Aston is working on that. And in the Substack, we want to have, a course that people can sign up for, pay money for access to it, where Seth and I will go through step by step. This is what you need to do to establish your law practice and then to grow your law practice. And, alongside that, in the Substack community, we'll be able to talk with one another. Attorneys from across the country could be a part of our Substack community and find us to be a resource. So that's kind of what I have in mind as far as the next steps for 2026 and in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great way to do it. I think it's kind of the mastermind or cohort approach in the Substack communities where we take a class through idea to launch within 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever the number looks like, and coach along the way and then have monthly check-in calls. I think we could also then, if there are other lawyers interested in providing the service, they could become a certified trainer of the law firm launch model or whatever we want to end up calling it. But the front lead magnet is going to be the front or public facing podcast hosted on YouTube, primarily the shorts, I would imagine, longer form interviews with law firm leaders throughout the country, get that interest generated. And then potentially that could also be a source of revenue with ad-based revenue from legal specific providers. We've got opportunities with the Indiana Rural Practice Academy. We've got opportunities with Solo Small Firm. We've got different things there. I think that'll be good for us over time. But the first thing is update our existing hosting platforms with, hey, this is kind of what the podcast is going to be about in 2026. We're going to help lawyers launch. We're going to share stories of successful law firm leaders who have done it before. And then I think the other thing we have talked about is kind of creating an interviewing type rubric and application process for potential guests. And so go through and identify, hey, we'd love you to come onto the podcast. Here's the questionnaire that we want you to fill out. That then would help us know, here's what we want to do. Here's the parameters of the interview, right? Like, we're family friendly, so we want to try to keep it family friendly. Those kind of things, because we have our kids potentially listening to this over time or whatever. So, but we're going to have to, as we grow as a podcast, kind of set the stage for some of that stuff, make sure it's ready to go. So yeah, I think that's great. I think we need to get the production schedule ramped up a little bit in terms of who we're going to be interviewing and when, make sure all our equipment is ready to go. I've rearranged my office 100 times and still don't feel like I have a good recording setup, but it's working for now. But those are things that over time I'd like to get dialed.
Yeah, and I need to at least get a better camera. I need to do that.
I've got a face made for radio, so it works out okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, I'm going to stop this. We'll see what we get from that, and then we'll do today's recording.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer Podcast. I'm Thomas Vick, Seth Wilson, with you today. Seth, how's it going?
Thomas, I'm doing great. We are fast rolling through the tournament that takes place this time of the year. So how's your bracket doing? I wanted to check in with that and see if you're still surviving.
I think I had about 50% of mine correct, which was good for about 7th place in my family of 12. So it was not my best outing. I think my brother was like at 99.6% or something like that. I think he only missed one in the first couple rounds.
Pretty amazing. Well, we were talking about how to prioritize different things in kind of the day-to-day life. And so maybe the, filling out your bracket didn't get as high a priority or as much focus and attention given everything else that's going on in the practice. So that's probably okay.
Thank you for giving me grace on that.
I haven't calculated mine, but there's the teams that I'm still rooting for are there, so that's a good thing, and always an exciting time to have that going on. Although the rest of the family, I think, gets a little tired of having basketball on all the time, so they'll be ready when March is over here.
Oh yeah.
So, hey, I thought today might be a good time to kind of put a capstone, I guess, on what we've been talking about in terms of finishing projects and getting things through the office, and talk more about the bigger picture of how do you approach the different projects or different activities that need to get done in the day-to-day operation of a law firm. When you're launching and leading a law firm, there's a lot of different hats that you need to wear, and you may have administrative tasks, you may have billable tasks, you may have just networking tasks that's more kind of a combination of those two. And so how do you prioritize what needs to get done when it seems like everything needs to get done?
Yeah, well, I think you, in kind of preparing for this podcast, you were listening to another podcast where they were kind of talking about the Eisenhower Matrix, and that's actually a term that I had not heard before. I think that my system for prioritizing certain tasks over others is kind of an intuitive gut feel in a lot of ways. Of course, I've got the systems in Clio where I've got task deadlines set, and I can rearrange those deadlines depending upon what pops up on any particular day. But I liked kind of how you described the Eisenhower Matrix and his decision-making process to figure out what is the item that he should be giving his attention to at any given moment. So I'd like for you to kind of introduce that to us.
Yeah, so this is an outgrowth of what folks have reported on Eisenhower using to help make those decisions in the heat of the moment and in the face of a lot of different variables. And so this is just a 2x2 grid where if you map it out on the upper left-hand corner, you have things that are urgent and important. On the right-hand side, on the upper side, you have things that are important but not urgent. And then on the lower side, you have things that are not important and urgent, and then things that are not important and not urgent. And so generally speaking, an activity may fall into any one of those quadrants. And so that then would delineate where the priority should lie. So, for example, if it's urgent and important, that's something that probably needs to get done today and get out the door, and you probably need to be the one to do it. And those are things that, frankly, should be the things that you're focusing on and getting handled. If it is important and not urgent, that's also an area that needs your focus and attention, because if those things don't get focused on, they will quickly fall into the other category of both urgent and important. And so if it's not urgent but important, put it on the calendar, make sure it gets scheduled, and put some focused time into it. And we'll come back to that in a minute on how I kind of approach that. If something is not important and urgent, then it's probably something that can be delegated to someone else. Someone else can make sure that that gets done and taken care of and handled for you, if you have the luxury of that capability. This is also something that potentially would be a candidate for AI to help you with. There's a lot of news this week about Claude and its co-work application, and how that reality is fast approaching, where you can tell your computer to do something and it goes and does it for you, and it's pretty neat. There's some stuff that's coming there. And then the last, bottom right quadrant of not important and not urgent, why do we have it on a list? Something we should be getting rid of. And I know when I was coming through law school, a very popular book at that time was Getting Things Done by David Allen. And all kinds of software and tools were built to implement that methodology, called the GTD methodology. And so a lot of applications that help manage projects and tasks and those kind of things now came directly from that time frame in that book. And that system was very important to the time of, hey, here's how we delineate and define different projects and actions, and how do we do things. And I think some of those things encouraged you to get everything off your mind and onto a list. Well, if you never go back and sort of figure out, is it a priority or not a priority or what have you, it just sits there on the list. And so I think there's some of that residual thinking that needs to be done to say, okay, let's see what we can get off the list. Or maybe we keep it as a not to do kind of thing, as a checklist of, boy, I said I wasn't going to do this again, and here I am.
Yeah, if I had to kind of give examples of what would fall into that upper left quadrant of urgent and important, you think about statute of limitations. And is it about to run? I'm meeting with a client today. Is the statute of limitations going to be up tomorrow? That would be an example of something that you need to give top priority to. And you've got to have that knowledge. You got to have a thorough review of the client's file so that you know that statute of limitations is real. I sometimes do Medicaid applications, and it's a month-to-month eligibility requirement. So a lot of times you've got to make sure that your client is under the acceptable resource level in order to qualify for the next month. So at the end of each month, we're like calling folks and saying, hey, remember, we said this earlier to you, but this is a reminder. You got to make sure that this is under this amount. So those are a couple examples where, your hair has to be on fire and you've got to get it done no matter what.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. And obviously, lawyers have a lot of responsibilities in terms of calendaring and making sure we're tracking those deadlines. And I think what's interesting is you mentioned sort of the system that you have in place to put deadlines, artificial deadlines sometimes, to help manage the workflow. And so as you intuitively go through your practice and figure out, okay, I have a response to this motion due on this date, which means I need to be submitting this to the court ahead of time so I'm not running up against, that's where your systems then can be read by the computers. And I know we've talked about how Clio has some AI tools built in to help manage some of that, which is pretty cool. And so this combination, I think, of the computer reading and interpreting my system and surfacing information then to help me make decisions on in this moment what needs to be done. It's really a good time. And I think it's built on some of these concepts like the Eisenhower Matrix or like getting things done methodology or whatever is there. But that's what helps you surface what needs to be focused on by you, what can be delegated, or maybe even what can be eliminated. And then on the other side of that is that scheduling. So, how do you handle, Thomas, some of the things that you want to get done, but you know aren't maybe the most urgent and can seem like they may take a back burner?
Yeah, appreciate you holding court there for me, Seth. Yeah, I think Clio has a lot of really good tools as far as knowing what the tasks are that you need to be working on. With Clio Duo, you're able to have kind of a graph of what matters seem to have the most pressing deadlines, what's coming up on your calendar, what tasks are going to be due. And it kind of organizes it based upon what it thinks your priority should be. But then even when you have the tasks within a Clio matter, you can determine, okay, this is a high priority task so that whoever is assigned that task will know, hey, I need to give this my full attention first thing in the morning and get that done before I move to anything else. And then, sometimes you have a task that's assigned and like you said, it's important, but it's not urgent. And I would say into that category, you could use Clio to mark the task as, well, maybe it's in review or it's pending or some other stage is attached to that task, and it can kind of tell everybody else in the organization, oh, somebody is working on that. That's good. It's an important thing that needs to be done, but it's not urgent. So it's a regular task. So using the tools that are available to you to kind of fill out that quadrant, if you will, is important.
Yeah, and I think one thing I've found over the years, Thomas, is it's so helpful to have a plan and work that plan. We've talked about that before, so we won't go through it again. But just knowing I've sort of put the guardrails around the day, and I'm going to be focused on these things that need to be done, it can be really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. That calendaring system is critical to give yourself space and time to think through problems. For somebody that's getting started, having a full calendar is not a problem that he or she might have, but eventually it will. Once you're at it long enough, you'll have a full day of appointments and you won't have time to actually get the legal work done. So it's a good problem to have, but you still got to get the work done somehow, some way. So yeah, I think you had some ideas about what to do with the tasks that are not important, but they are urgent. What kind of tasks might fall into that category?
So these are the important but the not urgent. And so top right quadrant. These are things like, hey, we really need to address how AI is going to influence our practice. We need to address this particular practice area because I think it's going to be not as big a part of my practice this year or whatever the issue may be. And so I think one of the things I've found is I just want to dedicate a small amount of time to working on that particular thing. And so I'll break it down to whatever the next step is and then put that on the calendar to actually do it. And I give myself plenty of time because I know I'm going to end up moving it potentially because something else is going to come up. But once I've done that once or twice, I know, boy, I really got to really get this done because it's moving closer to both the urgent and important stage. And so you may think about preparing your application. We're at the end of March, that comes out in July, maybe August, and I need to have that information kind of ready to go. Or we're getting close to the end of the month, the bank statements need to be balanced, and trust needs to be balanced. So, if I've done the work to get ready for. So little things like that can be helpful to break it down, get yourself something to get that started toward the bigger situation before it becomes a big situation.
Yeah. Another example of something in that category might be drafting your forms, putting templates into place so that you're not having to repeat over and over again the same type of typing that you have to do to fill out and a pleading, your appearance, certain motions. Those things can be templated so that it saves you a lot of time. But when you're in the moment, maybe you don't have time actually to put the template together. You just need to get the motion on file. You just need to get the answer on file with the court, get things submitted in a timely fashion. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I would save time in the future if I can put a template together. So I would say that's an important thing, but not necessarily an urgent thing. And, in those times where things are a little bit slow, that's an opportunity for you to make those templates happen.
Yeah, and I think having a good understanding of everything that it takes, so you have kind of a master list of all the stuff, and then you can start breaking it out into the quadrants, can help you know in those moments of downtime potentially, hey, this would be a good time to work on some of these things in that important but not urgent category.
Yep. Well, how about the category of I think it's not important but urgent?
Yeah, those are things that oftentimes that urgency may be a false sense of urgency, or it's just I delayed on dealing with this because it wasn't important and now it really will become a problem, but I need to get it done. And so a lot of those types of tasks can be delegated or good candidates for delegation. And so these are different things. Think of like setting up a computer or my desk so that there's not cables and cords everywhere. It could become urgent if I need to record something or hear via a mediation or hearing online, and my office looks like it's a tornado going through.
Yeah.
Those are things that somebody else could potentially do for me, or getting the bills paid every month. Those are urgent things oftentimes. They're also important, so kind of straddling that one a little bit. But somebody that could do that, if you are able to find somebody to do that or handle it. And so that's the type of stuff that I'm always looking to say, when I offload this, that get it done, they're going to be better at doing it anyway, but making sure that things happen.
I'm trying to think of what aspects of my practice would fit into the category of not important. It seems like I actually repeat myself quite a bit on this podcast about, hey, this is critical. This is really important. If you mess this up, you're not going to be successful for whatever reason. I find myself saying that, so trying to come up with something that's not important is a little bit hard for me. But sometimes it could be like, hey, and the things that you can delegate might fit into that category of, maybe a client has a question and you've kind of dealt with that question, and so it's not really important because you've already dealt with it, but maybe the client needs to be reminded. It's an urgent thing. The concern is still there. Well, maybe the delegation can be, you can have your assistant reach out to that client and say, hey, did you see this email that your attorney sent? Maybe that's a way that you can delegate it, because you've already given the substantive response that the client needs to be aware of, and maybe they just haven't seen that response. So sometimes clients have an urgency to their matter that in the grand scheme of things is not actually urgent, and maybe staff can kind of help communicate with the client to make sure that you kind of bring that client down from, in a crisis mode down to everything's okay.
Yeah. I think of other things like, hey, it's kind of urgent that the printer is on paper if we're printing, for a signing that's coming up or something. But is that something that is important for me to do? It doesn't take a legal skill to fill up a paper tray.
Yeah.
I love doing that, but I think those are the things. Do we have stamps? Do we have office supply? Do we? Those are the things that are urgent if you need them in a moment because you got to go into a client meeting or go to court. But that's not something you as a lawyer have to do. And I think that's a really important point to recognize that a lot of what the lawyer has to do is always going to fall into that important and urgent quadrant or the important and not urgent quadrant. It's never really going to jump into the not important side if it's a client related situation. And that's just unique in lawyers.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you on that. Yeah, office supplies, that's a great example of things that are not important for the attorney to do, but they are urgent. They need to always be available, and you need not have any delay because of office supplies and things like that.
Yeah. And so again, I think a helpful exercise is just kind of do a brainstorm list of everything that's kind of on your mind, and then organize that into this grid and kind of decide, you know what, there are some things that are candidates here to move around or be a little bit more intentional about, and start working on it on a weekly basis and kind of discipline yourself to get into that habit. And you'll start identifying those things that create the intuition that you've developed over your life and your practice, and help you sort things into the appropriate quadrant to really keep you focused on those most important big picture things that are going to move your practice forward.
Yeah. Well, Seth, I appreciate you bringing the Eisenhower Matrix to light today and helping us to kind of get through that and think through how to prioritize tasks. We are the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. We encourage everybody to actually go to our new website, lifetimelegacylawyers.riverside.com, and there you can check out all of the videos there. And then also you can check us out on youtube.com.
Well, Thomas, thanks so much for the time today. I appreciate it, and we will see everyone on the next one.
Thanks, everybody.